My father-in-law wants me to wake up at 5 in the morning to serve breakfast because that's what a real wife does, but I set his alarm for 4 in the morning so he can go hunting like a real husband. To begin with, let me introduce myself. I'm a 35-year-old married woman, and my husband is 37. We've been together for about 9 years and married for around 6. I know, I'm not great at keeping count, but what matters more, the numbers or loving each other. And I believe I love him because of all the support he's given me. We don't have marital problems, we agree on practically everything. I'd say we don't have issues within the marriage, our problems come from outside, from his family. Here's the thing, I'm a working woman who has decided I don't want children, which my husband agrees with, and I'm not a traditional woman. I don't think being traditional or not is good or bad, I'm simply not that way. He also knows perfectly well that I'm not a very good cook. It's not that I don't want to cook, but after just a couple of times when I made him spaghetti with bolognese, he said, "Leave it, love, I'll handle it." So most of the time he cooks while I take care of other chores like cleaning. That's how things work in our home, and it's a private arrangement between us. I know that as long as it works for us, it shouldn't bother anyone. But unfortunately, since we started dating, his parents have never been able to accept that two people independent from them might do things differently. They have always tried to impose their beliefs and traditions on us, and it has never worked, it has only made me like them a little less. But they've never been able to change my mind, because I firmly believe that what works for us is enough, and we don't have to follow what other people think we should do. Honestly, it shouldn't bother anyone how we organize our home unless they have major self-esteem issues and need to control everything, even other people's households. If our marriage didn't work, that's the only thing that should concern them. Being good parents means wanting what's best for your child, and it might sound harsh, but I see their son happy with me, just like I'm happy with him. But their need to make others do what they want is stronger. On several occasions, my in-laws, especially my father-in-law, have tried to give me little pushes in the right direction and have dropped hints that they want me to handle the cooking and all the other household chores. They want me to reduce my work hours to focus more on the home. Both he and his wife have always made it clear they're not happy with our decision not to have kids. Still, up until now, we've managed to maintain a peaceful relationship with them. We could ignore those things, neither my husband nor I are confrontational people, and although we don't like his parents trying to impose their beliefs, we try to let it go, because aside from that, we don't have major problems with them. It's not like my father-in-law is some psycho who would chase us through the woods in the middle of the night with an axe, during a full moon, obviously. That's why we've managed to live our lives the way we want without worrying too much about them. At the end of the day, we know they can't do much more than complain, and talking with our couple friends, everyone has differences with their in-laws. But recently we decided to move in with them for a couple of weeks or at most 2 months because our house was undergoing urgent renovations due to internal structural damage that was causing major problems. At first we planned to stay in a hotel until the work was finished, but after talking with his parents, my husband told me they offered to let us stay with them because they had a free guest room. And this wasn't a renovation because we didn't like the kitchen, this was an emergency renovation that would leave us with very little savings. So a hotel wasn't much of an option, and my family lives in another state, unless my parents could magically move our jobs there, staying with them wasn't possible. It wasn't really a decision we had many choices in. We also don't like going into debt, since we've seen what debt can do to some people, so in the end we moved in with them. And for the first 1 to 2 weeks everything was fine. But a few days ago, my father-in-law started annoying me with something completely arbitrary. They had already started complaining about certain things in subtle and careful ways, but it wasn't working. And since they were letting us stay without charging rent, we tried to be patient, even though my husband and I were already annoyed. The usual, they subtly but clearly hinted they wanted a grandchild. I was irritated and trying to hide it, but my father-in-law really tested my patience. A couple of days ago, he started suggesting that I should wake up earlier and follow the same routine as my mother-in-law, who has done that her whole life. Which is obviously impossible for me because, unlike her, I work. I don't have the time or the energy. Let me tell you my mother-in-law's routine. She wakes up around 4 or 5 in the morning and starts doing domestic work. She begins preparing all the meals of the day, for example chopping vegetables. After that she turns on the washing machine, then cleans and dusts the kitchen and living room while everyone is still asleep. She doesn't bother anyone that way. At 7 she starts preparing breakfast for her husband, and lately she's also been doing it for us, which means she has been waking up at 4 regularly. By 8, when everyone is awake, she serves the meal. Then she cleans and sweeps the bedrooms and makes all the beds. After everyone is finished, she finally eats breakfast herself. Of course, the rest of her day is filled with various chores and housework. She goes to bed around 11 at night after washing the dishes and wakes up again at 4 the next day. Now tell me, does anyone actually believe this is a viable lifestyle for me as a working woman? Obviously not, and I'm not going to put myself through all of that. I'm not used to it, my own mother never did things like this, so I'm not about to start making all that unnecessary effort. In fact, I've even told my mother-in-law she doesn't need to wake up early to prepare breakfast for my husband and me. She doesn't have to clean up after us either, we're not children, we can take care of our own things. But she insists she has to do everything herself. Sometimes my husband and I choose to go out for breakfast so we don't bother her, and we've even invited them along as a thank you. But my father-in-law says it's nonsense, and my mother-in-law believes she's always done things this way and isn't going to stop now. Same with the beds and things like that, we make our own bed, but I can tell at night that someone has undone it and remade it just because we didn't do it the way she's used to. To make things worse, my mother-in-law has back problems, so naturally doing that much work around the house isn't good for her. But my father-in-law insists it keeps her in shape, he says it gives her the exercise she needs, and that's why he refuses to hire household help, even though he can afford it. He doesn't seem to understand that given her condition and age, she's around 55, what she needs is rest, not more work. I'm not saying she's elderly, but it's a physically demanding lifestyle, and some help could really benefit her. Today I tried explaining all of this to her, especially to my mother-in-law, but she simply doesn't want to listen. They're trapped in their old customs and traditions, and my husband and I always end up very irritated by this kind of thing. We try to avoid it, but if she doesn't want to be helped, there's not much we can do. Anyway, it was already bad enough that she had to do all that, but then my father-in-law started insisting that I should also get up at the same hour as she does, or at least at 5, to help her. At first he just dropped hints, but when he saw I wasn't going to change my routine, he began trying to guilt-trip me, saying my mother-in-law had to do everything alone and that with more people in the house it was harder for her to manage, so she needed my help. Even though he never asked her for help, he made it sound like he was doing his wife a favor by asking me to get up and do everything she does. But I could clearly see what he was trying to do, it couldn't have been more obvious. What he wanted was for me to be a copy of his wife so that his son would also have someone who treated him like a child his whole life, so that he wouldn't have to do anything in the house while I ended up doing it all. Meanwhile, he only worked from 9 to 5 on weekdays, which would be practically nothing compared to what his wife has done in the house every single day for the rest of her life. It sounded like a real nightmare, and the fact that he insisted I follow that routine instead of doing the logical thing, everyone helping so my mother-in-law could finally get some well-deserved rest, was insane. Clearly, his priority wasn't his wife, his priority was putting me in my place. And some might say he's right because with more people in the house there's more to do, but ever since we moved in, my husband and I have been helping with things like cleaning or helping cook, well, not me cooking, because my husband doesn't want me near the kitchen, but you know. Which my father-in-law finds even more absurd, because his son should be doing other things, not helping his mother. The more he insisted, the more annoyed I became. I tried arguing with him, telling him that instead of forcing me to get up at an absurd hour, he could help everyone with something, this would make things much easier and fairer for everyone. But he refused. He started saying he was old and retired, that he had done enough in his life and now deserved to rest. I found that extremely funny and extremely hypocritical, because there he was claiming he was too old to help around the house while having no real health issues preventing him from doing light chores, and at the same time pretending to feel compassion for his wife while not lifting a single finger to ease her workload, even knowing she had back problems. So I ended up pretty angry that night. I decided to do something I knew would irritate him too. Without him knowing, while everyone was busy, I set an alarm clock in his room for 4 in the morning. For clarification, my mother-in-law doesn't need an alarm because she sleeps near the window, she just leaves the curtain partially open so the sunlight wakes her. She told me that during the first years of her marriage she did need an alarm because even she wasn't used to waking up that early, but my father-in-law didn't like it because the alarm woke him up too and stole hours of sleep from him. So she had to learn this new method, and you can imagine how ridiculous it sounded to me, but for her it was a funny story. Anyway, I knew how full of himself my father-in-law was, so I decided to set an alarm, and naturally the next morning, around 4, I heard him yelling in the other room because he thought my mother-in-law had set it and they were arguing. I was still half asleep, but I knew I wasn't going to let my mother-in-law take the blame, so I woke my husband for moral support and went with him to knock on their door. It took them a couple of minutes, but they finally opened, and my father-in-law looked very upset for being woken at that hour. However, since we were all awake at 4, including my mother-in-law, who was the only one who actually looked fresh and ready for the day, I said what I needed to say. I told my mother-in-law that I was ready to help her with all the house chores. Then I looked at my father-in-law and my husband and said that since the women of the house were going to do all the domestic work, we also expected them to do their part, that they should go out hunting, fishing, gathering, or whatever it was they were supposed to do, and then come back so we could all start our day. I remembered my father-in-law saying that good wives wake up early to keep the household in order, so I used that exact phrase and told him and my husband that good husbands also have to wake up early and do their part so the home can function. My mother-in-law and my husband looked a bit confused for a couple of minutes, but then they started laughing and so did I, because I thought what I had done was hilarious. Despite our differences, I genuinely thought it was the best way to handle my father-in-law. It was a bit mischievous, I admit it, but I don't think it was disrespectful or harmful. But I guess my father-in-law didn't see it that way because he looked furious when I said it, and when his wife and son started laughing he looked even angrier. He simply slammed the door in my face. I was caught off guard for a few seconds, but it was 4 in the morning and I wasn't about to step into a full-blown argument at that hour, so I went back to my room with my husband. After we laughed about the whole situation for a while, we went back to sleep. When we finally woke up at our usual hour, 8, we went to the living room to see what the atmosphere was like. My mother-in-law was working as usual, and my father-in-law was sitting on the sofa, but both of them looked quite serious. My mother-in-law wasn't laughing like she had earlier that morning, so I knew something had definitely gone wrong. I tried pretending everything was fine and went about my day as usual. For a while, nobody said anything, and my husband and I did what we normally do. But just as we were about to leave for work after breakfast, my father-in-law decided to speak. He probably chose that moment on purpose to make it as uncomfortable as possible, or maybe just to ensure we wouldn't respond too much since that would delay us for work. But he didn't know he was already standing on dangerous ground with me. Anyway, he started saying that he had done everything possible to understand us and accept our lifestyle, that he had tried to respect the choices we made for ourselves because at the end of the day, even if he didn't agree, we were adults and had the right to live however we wanted. He said he had always allowed us to do what we wanted, even if it went against his beliefs. He referred to our decision not to have kids, and in addition to that, he said we had also decided to ignore our obligations. He said I wasn't a good wife because I never cooked for my husband and left him to do all of that, while my husband wasn't a good husband because he never knew how to put his foot down. It sounded ridiculous to me, and I was about to interrupt him, but he stopped me. He said our behavior had reached his limit and he could no longer tolerate it, especially under his roof. He told me I was disrespecting his traditions and beliefs and that he wasn't going to allow it. That while I lived in his house, I had to live under his rules. And that's where I lost my patience. I had tolerated enough already. I couldn't stay quiet anymore, and even though my husband and I aren't confrontational people, we had to speak up then. We told him we were leaving immediately, that we had no interest in staying any longer, and that he was the one who insisted we stay in his house, but since we knew how they behaved, we were perfectly fine staying at a hotel. I told him I wasn't going to live under his conditions, that I wasn't going to let anyone mistreat me, and that I was going to live my life the way I wanted, and he wasn't going to stop me. I also told him his son was a much better husband and human being than he would ever be, and that he had no right to be lecturing us like that. Obviously my mother-in-law tried to intervene and calm things down, but everything was already out of control. In the end we left with our suitcases, and we both took the day off from work to look for a hotel because we were furious and had absolutely no intention of returning to my in-laws' house. In the end we walked out with our suitcases, and we both took a day off work to find a hotel because we were furious and had absolutely no intention of going back to my in-laws' house. My father-in-law ended by saying that I was the reason his son had become a doormat, that I was trying to emasculate him and turn him into a woman, which was exactly the kind of comment I expected from him because he's such an idiot. Anyway, for the last few days we've been staying in a hotel. We haven't had any contact with his father, but his mother has been begging us to come back home, to fix things with her husband, not for him, but for her. She said she really wants her son to stay in contact with her and doesn't want to lose either of us, but if he isn't on good terms with his father, she can't see how it could work, because she's not going to betray her husband. That's why she desperately wants us to fix things with him, and I know perfectly well that when she says fix things, she really means we should apologize to him, and I just don't see that happening. Now my husband and I are in a dilemma about what to do. On one hand, we don't want to abandon his mother. Even though she is on our side, she's nothing like my father-in-law, we believe she's a victim of his whims. But we're not going to apologize to my father-in-law for this. Edit, some people have asked why we didn't go to a hotel from the beginning if that's what we ended up doing. I guess reading comprehension wasn't taught in their schools, because it's clearly explained. You know how much hotels cost? Now we have no choice but to stay in one. And besides, the renovations don't have much left. By the way, they've been more expensive than we expected due to complications. Update 1. Except for people like my father-in-law or those who have trouble understanding what they read, everyone has said that he seems to get too angry over a simple joke and that he doesn't live by his own beliefs. He wants women to be traditional, but when it comes to him, no. To add more, during our stay at their house I never once saw him doing repairs or mowing the lawn, which are traditionally men's roles. Well, for that he had money, but not for anything that would make it less obvious that he treats his wife like a slave. And I also think we've done enough for my mother-in-law. If she can't see for herself that what is happening is not good for her, what more can we do? The only person who can break the cycle of abuse is her. We could kidnap her in the middle of the night with a van and a sack over her head, but as soon as we bring her to our home she'd go right back to hers because it's all she knows. She's happy, in quotation marks, and there's nothing we can do. I hope one day she opens her eyes. As for my father-in-law, we know perfectly well that with the kind of person he is, he's not going to accept us back into the family unless we apologize. He has a huge ego, and if he really wants to fix things with us, he'll have to make the first move, because we're not going to feed his ego and crawl back to him. That simply isn't going to happen after everything that was said and done that day. We've been trying to explain that to her, but she keeps insisting that we need to be the mature ones, which doesn't even make sense because I think we've already tried to do exactly that, and it hasn't worked. So now I've let my husband decide what he wants to do, because at the end of the day they're his parents and he can choose what he wants. I don't want to get more involved because it's not my direct family, and it isn't necessary for me to have a close relationship. I know it's affecting him too, and I'm doing everything I can to support him, but beyond that I'm not going to keep trying to explain things to my mother-in-law. Every time we try, we get nowhere and end up having the same conversation over and over again. We go in circles and nothing changes. It's too frustrating for me to deal with right now, so I'm choosing to distance myself from the situation. Honestly, I don't see any other way out, and I know it will be difficult, but if the moment comes, I think my husband will have to do the same. Luckily he has me, and I know I'll do everything I can to keep him from feeling guilty because none of this is his fault. Update 2. Well, it's been a week since my last update, and my husband had to make the difficult decision to let his mother distance herself from his life. Until recently he had been having the same argument with her. He told her that this time he couldn't stay silent and avoid confrontation because what happened was unacceptable. His father would have to apologize if he wanted to have a relationship with us again. He made it very clear that he didn't want to and had no intention of apologizing to his father in the future, but he still wanted a relationship with his mother, and if that meant she had to go against her husband to have it. He said it shouldn't be such a difficult decision for her. Instead of always trying to make everything convenient for her husband, she should try thinking from her son's perspective as well. She refused to understand something so simple. Instead, she began making him feel guilty, saying she felt like she was being torn in two between her husband and him. She repeated that we were making everything much more difficult than it needed to be. She said it was my husband's ego and her husband's resentful nature that were going to destroy her. Basically, she tried to make it sound like she was angry at her husband, but at the end of the day she still wanted him to keep the position of power, and that's why she wanted her son to apologize. Otherwise, she herself would have convinced her husband to apologize because even she knows what should happen. Anyway, eventually I think it became too much for my husband to bear, and he decided to stop trying. Since then, in the last few days, she hasn't called him either, so I guess this is over. It's sad, but well, it had to happen at some point, it couldn't drag on forever. He's very affected, I can tell, but I'm doing everything I can to cheer him up and distract him, and I just hope we can get past this bad stage soon. Fingers crossed. Update 3. A month has passed since my last update, and we're finally back in our own house as of a few weeks ago. What a relief. As I said, my husband decided to distance himself from his mother because he didn't see any other way out. Clearly she wasn't ready to hear the truth or respect our choices, so we had to let her go. Since then, we haven't heard from her or his father, but the rest of the family has told us that they, have been telling everyone that they chose to disinherit us both because we are extremely disrespectful and our lifestyle is far too deviant from what they believe is correct. Take that however you want. I can't say I'm surprised, but honestly the fact that they're speaking badly about us to others is pretty discouraging. I expected a bit more from them, that was my mistake, of course. Anyway, it doesn't matter, because my husband is doing much better emotionally now. It seems he doesn't care as much, and neither do I. We're in a much better place now that we don't have to tiptoe around these people or constantly avoid confrontations. I feel an enormous sense of relief, and I think we did the right thing, so I have no regrets. Update 4. I'm back because my mother-in-law has been hospitalized. Apparently all the work she does for my father-in-law finally caught up with her, and she collapsed. From what I know, my father-in-law found her on the kitchen floor one morning and had to call 911. They've been running tests to find the cause of the fainting. She was also dehydrated, and her back pain was unbearable. I haven't been able to visit her at the hospital, even though I want to, but my husband told me that since his father would be there, it's better not to add more stress to his mother. His father was already furious when he saw my husband, blaming him for his mother's condition. The thing is, we're hoping that when she's discharged, she'll come live with us, and that's why my husband is recruiting other family members to talk to her. This has gone way too far, and if she returns home she'll keep overworking herself to death, which might actually happen soon at this rate. For now, the doctors believe her collapse was due to stress, but they're also monitoring her because she hit herself badly during the fall. Maybe this will be the wake-up call she needs to finally open her eyes, or at least the wake-up call for my father-in-law to realize she can't do everything for him forever, not unless they move somewhere smaller so she won't have to spend hours maintaining the house. Update 5. I think I finally have a happy ending to my story, because my mother-in-law is staying with us. It took several conversations my husband had with her while his father wasn't around, but he eventually convinced her. We also had help from other relatives who told her the same things or distracted my father-in-law so my husband could speak with her alone. Basically, she collapsed from exhaustion. Now she's been prescribed rest, low-impact activities, medication for her back, and rehabilitation. That's what she's been receiving, because in our house we don't let her lift a finger, we're giving back the care she gave others. I even offered to cook, but my husband said his mother has already had too many hospital visits because of that, so we all laughed. That's how a harmless joke should be taken. In addition to that, my mother-in-law is filing for divorce, and not just maybe, she has already submitted the paperwork. My father-in-law didn't even agree with her coming to live with us, and he certainly didn't like the divorce, but his ego is so big that at the moment it works in our favor. He's expecting her to return and crawl back to him so he can forgive her, something that is not in her plans anymore. That's why I think this is a happy ending, because although I don't like seeing people divorce, in my father-in-law's case, it seems more than appropriate. Even with everything she did for him, he was never willing to help her in anything. He was ready to keep treating her like a slave until she died. Update 6. I wasn't planning to update again, but many people wanted to know whether my mother-in-law went through with the divorce or if she backed out. Believe me, I also had my doubts, but she saw it through to the end. She now lives a few blocks from us, in a smaller apartment, and her life could not have changed more dramatically. She has a group of friends she made after signing up for classes to stay active. She goes out for coffee with them or meets them for lunch. Her apartment is smaller, which means less work and more time to do what she enjoys. She even adopted a little dog she takes for walks 3 times a day, which helps her stay moving. My husband visits her often because he can walk over when the weather is nice, and sometimes she comes over for dinner, not cooked by me, obviously, or we go to her place. She doesn't work, but she receives alimony from my father-in-law. After working so many years for him to the point of ruining her health, it's the least he owes her. My father-in-law kept the house, although he had to pay her share in the divorce. I don't know why he wants such a big house if he can barely maintain it. He refuses to repair his relationship with his son, and the only things we hear about him are from other family members. They say he lives in filth because he refuses to hire someone to clean and doesn't do it himself. His plan is to find another woman, so he's attending senior dating events, but so far he hasn't had any luck, and I doubt he ever will. An independent woman living alone is unlikely to tie herself to my father-in-law just to become his servant.